Hello everybody and welcome to another one of our short training videos. Now we live in a world where there are many subjects that are so important to leadership. So many subjects that sometimes we think about in a political sense or a nationalistic sense and forget that as we grow ourselves to be leaders, they are central and crucial to the way in which our leadership is going to grow. Now we've been following through on these various different videos. I've been sharing with you various aspects about how it takes you to learn and understand different things that enable you to become a more effective, a more successful leader. So not only understanding some leadership traits and skills and abilities that I've shared with you, but also those that you can bring to the table and help you to grow as a leader. It is so important to understand how external aspects affect your leadership style and how you address those within your team and your company. Today we're going to talk about the subject of cultural diversity. Now, inevitably, that's why I started out by saying there are many things that are political. Cultural diversity over the past few years has become very, very important, not only in terms of the way businesses are structured and run, but also in the way in which we ourselves approach and understand the issue and subject of cultural diversity. And yet, it's been around forever. There is absolutely nothing new about cultural diversity or diversity in and of itself. And yet, it's something that has come to the forefront and which is very, very important for us to look at and understand. So before we dive into that, I just want to remind you that my name is Chris Igwe. I have over 35 years experience of growing, leading and developing teams across the 5 major countries I've lived in, but also across Europe, Middle East and Africa. Now, if you're used to these videos, then please feel free to like, to comment and to share your thoughts and questions in relation to the topics being discussed. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you know and hear when other videos are coming through. Cultural diversity. Well, I want to start off with one thing, which is to say that I had the privilege of writing and co-authoring a book called Secrets of Working Across 5 Continents, and more importantly, the subtitle, Thriving Through the Power of Cultural Diversity. And in the section that I wrote about, which is pretty much a book in itself, I wrote about visionary and authentic leadership. Now, visionary and authentic leadership within the idea of bringing in those cultural differences, and with those who supported me in that journey of discovery, who had worked themselves across different countries and markets, I was able to understand and get underneath some of the issues involved in leadership around cultural diversity. So let's start off with something really very basic, I would say, but very important for us to understand. There are many different descriptions of cultural diversity, and this is the one that I like most, and you may have your own thoughts around it as well. It's the existence of a variety of cultural and ethnic groups in a society or in businesses or in or across countries. The existence of a variety of cultural or ethnic groups in a society, business and countries. That's why I say it's not so much new as it is something new that we have to embrace in the context of leadership. Now, a very quick example. First of all, as you can imagine, cultural diversity is something that I have lived with and worked amongst for my entire career, my entire life. On the one hand, from a personal level, being born and raised in Nigeria in Africa, moving through different countries, then going to Scotland where I met my wife. So our children are brought up in multiple cultures as well. So I speak from personal experience, not only in business, but also in life. So the fact that our children have to embrace 2 different cultures, but we've also lived in different countries, Switzerland, France, the Netherlands, and of course, England as well. So those things become part of the way in which you function. But it's complicated as well by the fact that not only do we have to understand cultural diversity, but we also need to look at some of the benefits, because you could say, well, it's not all positive. But we're going to focus on the positive because that's what leadership does and is. The benefits, first of all, is that when you understand and embrace the cultural diversity within your team, your department, your company, you then have the opportunity to generate new ideas. You generate innovative ideas. They may be existing, but they may be transformed in a certain way because somebody sees something that you don't see yourself. And of course, as a leader, you want to develop new strategies. So when you have new ideas, innovative ideas, developing new strategies, clearly that has to be a positive. But in today's world, it is an even more complex matrix than perhaps when I first started my career in business. And let's just look at some of these for a minute. On the one hand, we've got race. And as you and I know, the whole Black Lives Matter movement has become more and more accentuated. But I want to put it to you that race, and whether it's Black Lives Matter, which is what most people equate it to be, it's much more complex and deep than that. Today we talk about gender, and rightly so, having more women in leadership roles and positions. But it's not just about women. We also know that sexual orientation is part of that complex discussion and debate. We talk about religion. We know there's a cleavage essentially in the world we live in today between Muslims and Christians. And yet within each of those groups, let's take Christianity, which I'm a part of, whether you're Catholic, Roman Catholic, Anglican, Methodist, and various other religions or aspects of Christianity within that, and then the extreme ones as well. So even within Christianity, there are different complex combinations. So what I'm putting to you here is that you can't just take cultural diversity as a simple, straightforward men, women, white, black, Christian, non-Christian. It's way more complex than that. And imagine when you melt all these together, and it doesn't take me to explain to you that you could have a black individual who is a woman, who is Muslim. How is she being treated in your leadership style? How do you see her being developed and grown in that role? Because you see, one thing that is fundamentally important to understand is that as individuals, we all have, to a certain degree, what we call conscious or unconscious bias. What that means is that you have a preconditioned approach to how you see things. It could be from your upbringing, could be from your education, could be from your culture, could be from your own religion. It just could be your own view of the world. And we all have very different ones. So they are all colored and tarnished by that conscious or unconscious bias that we may have. The additional factors, I wanted to throw those in there. And again, this is not rocket science, but I'm building this into a picture whereby you can see and understand that it is not as simple as you might think, and therefore you've got to work harder to get into it. We've got demographics. Demographics could be what I've just explained in my family, moving from one country to another, the children growing up in one country or a different one. One of our children grew up in Italy, where she decided to go and spend part of her life. We all have complex combinations whereby it's not just about travel, it's also about the fact that there are different minorities that start to come into different cultures over time. Technology, it goes without saying, but technology in this sense, let me take it for example, which is linked to globalization, but let's say because of the speed of communication, I, as a boss, send an email first thing in the morning or an action item to my team, and part of that team is, let's say, in Australia, or indeed on the west coast of the US or in Asia, and they get it in a different time frame, and they respond differently to what I might have been asking them to do. How are you going to address that? So technology has speeded up the way in which we do things, but it has also provided an additional layer of complexity of dealing with it. And of course, it could simply be technology in terms of tools that we use for our business, which I discussed in a previous video. Globalization, inevitably, our businesses are more global. They have offices in different places or factories around the world. How is that all playing in where you are leading a team and you are in a Western culture and a significant part of the business is in Africa or Asia or in South America where the culture is different from your own? How do you deal with that? And of course, economics. Could be anything like today with the pandemic that we have. And for example, in France, we talk a lot about made in France. So the idea that various products, factories, distribution systems will be coming back to being local, not necessarily because they're cheaper, but because there is a certain element of protectionism, but also dealing with the future where we may be too dependent on Asian countries for our deliveries and so on. So these are all additional factors which layer into this cultural diversity piece. But before I go any further, what I want to say is how this all ties into leadership is on the basis that as leaders, we need to understand how each of these play into our bigger picture of how we want to see our team grow and develop. And the reason I say that is because of this. When we look at the way in which cultural diversity can support us, there are positives at the end of the day. And there's been some research, quite a bit of research done, which demonstrates that the positives that come out of embracing cultural diversity are that businesses who do that, and by the way, it's not just about acknowledging it, it's about putting a strategy in place that allows cultural diversity to develop and evolve in the business. So they've shown that there are increased sales and revenue. There is increased profitability of those businesses that demonstrate the positive inclusion of cultural diversity. And also for those who want it and where they want it, it's about increasing the market share. So cultural diversity, as complex as it is a way in which you can bring together the teams that you are working with by understanding what their issues, their way of thinking, their way of acting might be, and then you empower them through that knowledge to become better members of your team. Because remember, and we've talked about this quite a bit, how to become a better leader is as much how you become a better leader at growing, developing, and building your teams. Because as leaders, you don't want to be doing everything. That is not your role. You have a more visionary, strategic, longer term thinking, but you want to develop your team such that these differences, in fact, become positives, as I've mentioned before. Imagine a group coming together from different cultures, different nationalities, different genders, different perspectives, and they come together, they brainstorm, they come out with ideas where, by the way, you have not conditioned the response, but you have allowed them the freedom to come up with solutions. I know some very successful companies who simply allow their teams to brainstorm. And brainstorming is such an important skill and ability because you take the leader out of it, you allow the team to find their own way, and through that process, they can actually come up with some amazing ideas. Remember, as the leader, you're not the one that has to come up with all the ideas. You can, and you should, and you must, but you have to vet them, make sure they make sense. So by understanding and embracing cultural diversity, you can grow not only yourself as a leader because you see the other person's perspective. You understand what it is that they're trying to say. And even if you don't, you are open and honest enough to say, I don't understand, but let's take this further. Let's see where it goes. Because cultural diversity is going to be more and more important in today's world. So the ability to lead by embracing that diversity is going to be so much more important for you going forward into the future. I know because I've experienced it firsthand, like I say, not just in my family, but also the teams that I've helped in different parts of the world, in Asia and Africa, in the US, by just listening, by understanding, by taking yourself out of the equation and saying, okay, let's learn together. Those are all very, very powerful and so important. I just want to close with a very short story, which can also show you how, as I said at the beginning, when we become too political around a particular topic, we miss the key idea. I'm very successful and very well known in my industry, and I approached a company quoted on the stock exchange, and I knew where I could offer some support to them. So I wrote to the CEO, know him very well, and said, I'm available, love to be considered to be a member of your board, because I know what I can bring to you as value. You know the interesting thing? It's an amusing story, but it kind of explains very much what I'm going to share with you now. The response by this individual was to say, thank you very much. In fact, you're right, we do need to have diversity, but we're looking for a woman. A woman, get that? Now, you may at first glance say, well, that's fair, because there wasn't a woman on the board. In fact, there was, but that's not the point. The fact is, I tick those boxes of not only color, but also in my game, I'm at the top of my game in the industry, and I have considerable value that I could provide to that business. But the focus was only on bringing in a woman at a senior level. See, that's what I'm saying about you become myopic. You can miss the big picture. I may not be available again, so that company might have missed the boat. I'm not saying they have, but by not stepping back and saying, how can we use the skill and knowledge of someone who has a diverse culture, diverse view, diverse approach to what it is they want to do or they need, that you miss the opportunity. So don't be myopic. Don't lose sight of what you need to do as far as the big picture is concerned. But whatever you do, embrace cultural diversity, because it's so important going forward and is going to really help you drive your leadership, your skills and your ability. So please feel free to comment, like and share, and if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them and be able to respond to them. But whatever you do, please subscribe to the channel so you know when the next videos are coming out and we can share and continue this journey together. Thank you.